Welcome, everyone, for the session on using Power View reports with your multidimensional model. So this is a 300-level session. So essentially, you need to know a little bit more about multidimensional models, as well as some of the basics of Power View, so that you can explore how does the integration look like. How many of you have used multidimensional models? Okay, quite a lot of them. Power View, how many of you have used Power View? Okay, right. So I'll go through the agenda here. So I'll give an initial overview of how the integration of Power View connecting to multidimensional model, what our approach was, how did we go about implementing this so that you get the best implementation from the end user's perspective. And then we'll go into various objects of the multidimensional model. How are these getting exposed? All of this will be fully based on demos so that you can see how this is working end-to-end. And then we added one additional enhancement called pin filters in Power View as part of the overall integration. I'll talk a little bit about why we did this, what is the benefit out of it. And then I have a few pre-planned Q&A, which several customers have asked, and then I can take additional questions. Okay? So it'll be a lot of demos. Hope you'll like each of the demos here. So one of the key things which we heard from a lot of the customers, people have spent millions of dollars investing in terms of multidimensional models with consultants, and going and changing these models will be significantly challenging. Okay? So as part of it, primarily one of the key goals we had was people should be able to upgrade their existing multidimensional servers, just upgrade to whatever version where it supports, and it should just work. Okay? So if you connect from Power View, connecting to your existing multidimensional model, after you do the upgrade with the appropriate bits, it should just work. Okay? So here, what you have here is you have an information worker who's connecting using Internet Explorer, connecting Power View, using Power View. And it comes into reporting services, which is installed on SharePoint. It could be 2010 or 2013. It could be either of them. So you just need SQL Server 2012. Getting the reporting services getting installed in SharePoint mode. And as part of what shipped in SQL Server 2012, this Power View can talk to analysis services tabular model. First, it sends tabular metadata request. So this is command discover CSDL metadata. So it sends and says, give me all the tabular objects. What are the tables? What are the columns, measures? Please give me all the metadata so that I can visualize and show this in the field list for people to interact and use Power View. And once the tabular metadata is retrieved, the user has a certain set of actions in terms of dragging and dropping a particular column, measure. All these are implemented in terms of DAX queries. All these DAX queries go back to analysis services tabular model, and then you see the data. Now, coming into the implementation of how does Power View connect into multidimensional model, we had multiple approaches which we considered. One is we can say reporting services understands MDX. It translates the user data and sends MDX to analysis services. Or there's an intermediate layer that converts MDX from DAX to MDX. But what we said would be the right thing to do is implement all of the logic in analysis services engine so that if we can optimize it to the best extent possible, and longer term, we can optimize it further as we make additional enhancements. Okay? So from reporting services, it still sends tabular metadata request. It does not know, reporting services does not know whether it's tabular or multidimensional analysis services. It just knows it's analysis services. It's connecting to one single BI semantic model, and it sends a request for tabular metadata, and then sends appropriate DAX queries. Okay? So this is the up to SQL Server 2012 SP1 CU3. This is the overall diagram. You have one single BI semantic model, and you can create it two different ways. One is a multidimensional one, another one is tabular. And here, you can create all your business logics in MDX here, while for tabular, you create all your business logics in terms of DAX expressions here in DAX. From client tools perspective, you can have various client tools connecting. So far, with multidimensional, all these client tools send MDX. Okay? And with the tabular model, you have various client tools sending MDX, as well as Power View sending DAX queries. Okay? And this is the lower level is a storage layer in terms of ROLAP or MOLAP, which you're familiar with. And with respect to Tabular, you have Vertipack and Direct Query. Now, with this enhancement which we have made, so the changes we have done is making sure now you have DAX query support directly for the BI semantic model, and then we have made some additional enhancements in reporting services Power View to make sure some of the additional metadata complexities in multidimensional model are appropriately exposed. Okay? And you'll see these in the demo. Okay? And this is a quick overview of how does the various multidimensional objects, how do these get mapped onto when you see them in Power View. These go through various objects here. At a high level, think of it as people should be familiar with, you have multidimensional model, you have measure groups. Each of the measure group is exposed as a table, and then each of the dimensions are exposed as table. And you have measures within the measure group, as well as you have dimension attributes which get exposed as columns. This is a high-level overview of the how are the multidimensional objects, and how do these get mapped into the tabular metadata. Okay? So each cube, the one important factor is each cube in the multidimensional database corresponds to a single model, what you see in Power View. Okay? And one of the key questions, a lot of the customers, when we did this presentation earlier, they had asked, how do you do this internally in the engine? Do you convert DAX to MDX? So I put together this slide. Hopefully this helps better to understand exactly what goes on internally in the engine. And these are various components in the engine. Think of it as like these are client application, which is sending various queries. Within the engine, which is the analysis services here, you have a query parser, which parses any queries that are coming in. You have what we call as the query processor, or people might be familiar with as Formula Engine before. So this is a query processor, and you have the storage engine layer, which is retrieving the data from the aggregations or directly from the partition data. Okay? And you also have a metadata layer, which loads all the metadata and satisfies any of the discover commands, schema discovers, metadata, how does it look like. So let's walk through how does a DAX query, or when Power View connects, what happens. Okay? So when a cube is initially loaded, all the multidimensional metadata gets loaded into the metadata layer. And the first request, what Power View sends, is discover CSDL metadata. Okay? When this request is sent, this is the query parser understands this is a request for metadata, and this gets routed to the metadata layer. And here, the conversion of multidimensional metadata to tabular metadata happens here. Okay? Once this happens here, this is sent back to the client as part of the schema. Power View now understands this tabular schema, and depending on what the user action is, it sends the appropriate DAX query. Okay? So the DAX queries are formed based on the metadata which is prescribed in the response back. Okay? And the DAX query comes in, and it comes into the query processor, especially to the DAX query processor, which is the new one which we've added as part of the implementation. It validates the query coming in has the right metadata. Right? So it's more in terms of these are the columns, these are the tables. Is it conforming to the cube which is being connected to? That's what it validates. After the validation occurs, it sends any of the MDX measures, because all of the measures in the multidimensional model are MDX measures. It sends the MDX measure request to MDX Formula Engine. Okay? Because this is where all the MDX calculations occur in terms of the evaluations. So this is where it sends all the calculations here. And if you have any dimension-related queries, when I say dimension, let's assume that you have fact internet sales, fact reseller sales, and you have a customer dimension. And this dimension is going to be, the customer dimension is going to be exposed as a customer table. And any of the columns requested in that will be considered as a dimension query. These get routed to the storage engine directly. Okay? And goes to the formula engine, checks for the caches here, if it can satisfy based on the caches, pre-existing caches. If not, the query gets routed to the storage engine. And then in the storage engine, you have a separate cache for retrieving the data in the storage engine. So if it hits the cache, the result will be automatically returned back. If not, it goes into the partition query data. Whether it's reading the data from the partition or from aggregations, it retrieves the data, and then all the results are sent back. Okay? Any questions so far? Yes?
How different is the DAX query processor within analysis services multidimensional to the one in analysis services tabular?
So it is the same query processor with a little bit enhanced to appropriately match this. Okay. So even the tabular metadata here, this is a completely exposed as one single tabular metadata in terms of tabular and multidimensional, so that the interface is much more exactly the same. Right? It's the same DAX query processor, but it understands a little bit more because this is a multidimensional model.
Okay. For those cases of dimension queries or table queries,
Mm-hmm.
you can expose, or you would be able to expose certain columns as implicit measures.
Okay.
Such a query, what path would it take? Would it be internally considered by the MDX formula engine, or would it go directly to the storage evaluation?
Okay, good question. So the question is, you can have various columns in the dimension tables, and if you request for implicit measures, what happens? So we currently don't support implicit measures on top of dimension attributes, and this is not getting exposed mainly because of the fact you can have a particular dimension column which has tons of millions of members. Doing some simple operations is going to be very complex. And we didn't want people to run into performance issues by default. People have never used this before in the multidimensional model. That was another reason this doesn't get exposed. But you can form your own query based on the metadata. Then it will go through the MDX formula engine and then come back, because it needs to do some calculations. It's officially not supported, and it will not be exposed in Power View as well.
One of the advantages of tabular is that it's very powerful for detail level query, which was, or it has traditionally been one of the weaknesses of MDX and multidimensional. If I submit a query that is granular, how's the performance? Have you done any performance tests to compare?
So we've done some performance tests comparing similar reports in pivot table with MDX versus DAX. We've not seen any performance degradation, significant performance degradation when you compare both these models. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to jump into the demo. After this, it's going to be completely, all of them will be demo-based. And okay, so I switched over. This is SQL Server Data Tools. And this is the AdventureWorks sample, which gets shipped as part of each of the releases. This is the sample that's shipped as part of SQL Server 2012. I've made one minor enhancement to this, which we will talk about later in the demo. So what I wanted to walk through is, so you have the measures, you have the various measure groups and various measures. Now, first one is the demo will be like, how are these measures getting exposed in Power View? Okay, so these are the measures, and these are the measure groups. And in addition to that, I also wanted to show KPIs. So KPIs internally in the multidimensional model, these are internally still stored as measures. Okay, so here you have, for example, growth in customer base, and you see associated measure group. So these are part of the measure group. These are, think of it as internal measures, but when it's getting exposed, it's exposed as a KPI from a client tool perspective. So internally, they are still measures. So we wanted to align all these KPIs going under the right measure group to align with what has been implemented, so that KPIs show up in that. And one of the key things I want to highlight here is the KPIs in multidimensional model have trend. They have trend indicator, and trend is not available in the KPIs in tabular model. It only has status. So this is trend, which is something which is new here. And in addition to that, let me go down here. You see one more thing here, which is display folders. So this is one thing which lot of the multidimensional model, there are various objects, number of dimension attributes, a lot of the measures. People want to create custom folders under which they want to put it, organize it. So this is something, display folder, which is a 2-level display folder here. And this is also will be exposed in Power View. Okay? So having done that, I'm going to go into So here I have a connection here. Let's look at the connection. How do you form the connection here? So you would need to create an RSDS file, which is a reporting services data source file. And you need to select the data source type as Microsoft BI semantic model for Power View. And other than that, it's all the similar thing in terms of putting the connection string to the analysis services here, where you have specified the server name, the database name, and then you have the cube name. I mentioned initially each of the cubes is getting exposed as a model in Power View. So you need to specify the cube name here. And this cube name can serve as cube name or a perspective name. It could be either of them. So you can also use perspectives here in Power View right now. Okay. So once you click on this, now Power View launches. It sends discover CSDL metadata, and now you see the Power View field list here. We'll walk through each of the things as part of this. So I've created several views in Power View here. So I'm going to expand. So here you see the internet sales measure group. Each of the measures are showing up as measures inside this here in Power View field list. And if you see here, this is the folder. So this growth in customer base. You see the display folder showing up under the table. And you have value, status, goal, and trend. Okay? And one of the key things you to notice here, you'll see that the tables on the top here are prefixed with a summation sign. This is to indicate all these are tables which only contain measures. Okay? And the tables below are the actual dimension tables. Okay? This is consistent. Similarly, it will be applicable for tabular and multidimensional as part of this release. So if you have a tabular model which has a particular table, which has all the columns hidden, and you create all the measures inside the table, then you will see the measures inside that particular table with a summation sign. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select here internet sales amount and status and trend. Okay? So this is getting the values. This is getting formatted with the dollar symbol here in terms of the formatting which is there. You get the graphic for status as well as trend. Okay? And you can see the performance, how it is. This is obviously this is a sample cube. You can see the performance, how so switching back, I'm going to so these are the cube dimensions here, which are part of the AdventureWorks model. And each of these dimensions are exposed as a table. And you have various attributes, hierarchies, which are part of this particular table here. All these are getting exposed in Power View. Okay? So I'm going to switch back. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add so you see date. Let me expand here. So for the specific date dimension here, you see each of the attributes are shown as columns here. And you have hierarchies which are getting exposed as hierarchies. You see the display folder. So the display folder gets applied both for tables, dimension as well as measure group. Okay? We'll see hierarchies in a bit, but before that, I just want to add one thing here. I'm going to add calendar here. So here, I've just created a very simple table here. I've added calendar year. These are the values which are showing up for each of the years. You can see the status and the graphic which are getting calculated appropriately for each of these years. Okay? And I think this changes a little bit for fiscal years. Let's see how this is for fiscal year. Now we can see the right KPI is getting applied for each of the fiscal years, the values, appropriate graphic getting shown, both for individual rows as well as the total rows, and appropriate trends also getting indicated. Okay? All this is coming directly from analysis services. Okay? So that's about measures and measure group. So the next one I'm going to do is dimension attributes in terms of how are these getting exposed. You saw a little bit in terms of the date column here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into geography table. So I'm going to open up geography dimension here. And so this geography dimension has city, country, a few of the attributes here. And when you click on city, one of the things which shows up here attribute type. So this is a property for a particular dimension attribute called attribute type, and this is marked for city. And Power View understands some of these attribute types, especially for city, state, country, location-related information. And what you see in Power View for this geography is you see the map icon next to it. So it understands and indicates, okay, these are geographical related information. You can visualize this along with map. Okay? So you're going to see that now. So I'm going to click on country here. And I'm going to make this as a slicer. And let me click on state province. And I'm going to select reseller sales amount here. So now you get to see the values for each of the states and for all the states here. And now if you apply a filter, for example, United States, you get to see the states completely only in the United States and the total for that. Okay? And you can obviously change this visualization to a matrix or a column chart or a map, because if you have map information. So now the data is getting populated automatically for the map information. And so if you go into Australia, for example, this gets automatically shifted here. So let's get back to United States. I'm going to do one more thing as part of the visualization. I'm going to add another one. Let me add reseller order count. And going to make this as a bar chart here. And once I click on clothing, you can see what are the values, how are these shifting. You'll see the cross-filtering happening between the map integration as well as the other, the bar chart which is here. Okay? And one more interesting thing you can do here, you can also add date-related information. If you want to go into the map and see so how is the overall, you saw the overall sales amount. Now how is this getting applied for various calendar years? So you can see this information. You can still click on individual cells here for a particular year. How does it get translated? You can see the values. Okay? So it's more of an interactive ad hoc visualization using Power View. For the multidimensional model, you don't have to do anything. Just upgrade your multidimensional model to the server, which has this, and connect with Power View. It should just work. Okay. So now let's get in the next one, which is, yes, hierarchies. Yes.
One question on the attributes. Right now, Power View understands when you mark an for instance, if in the dimension you have latitude and longitude, does it recognize those as well?
So the question is whether PowerView recognizes latitude and longitude. So right now, in order for it to recognize its latitude and longitude, it essentially PowerView expects the results in a value. Okay, it's not because all the values which are getting returned from a dimension are all strings. Okay, so one of the things you could try is you can set up the value column in the dimension attribute and specify the value column, and that value column will be returning the right data type, and then apply this in PowerView. Okay. Yes.
Previous session, I've seen such a feature like this. I think that was the same. And I misrecognized, but it was like when it interprets city information, it sometimes makes a failure of, let's say, you have the city with the same name, plenty of blur.
Yes.
How could we handle that?
Yes. So the question is, sometimes PowerView does not know how the city is mapped. The reason behind this is we get the city information. PowerView gets the city information and sends it to Bing. So it's all mapped directly from Bing. And Bing, by default, maps the city to one of the default cities, right? So the way to override this is if you combine city, state, and country as a single string separated by comma, like how you would write a postal code. Then you pass it on to Bing, then you should be able to address this. Okay? So you would need to form a dimension attribute which concatenates these values and the calc column in the data source view, and then you should be able to do this.
Bing results back longitude information.
Sorry?
Bing results back longitude information based on the city name.
Yes, Bing returns back certain information, and that gets appropriately plotted in the map. Okay? That's the way to address this. Okay? So we're going to see hierarchies. How are these getting exposed? There are two different types of hierarchies. One is a regular hierarchy, which is the multi-level hierarchy, which you see in the multidimensional models. So I'm just going to switch over here. So this is a regular multi-level hierarchy in the multidimensional model. You have country, state, city, postal code. And then the second type of hierarchy is the parent-child hierarchy. And for the parent-child hierarchy, so for example, you have employee, and this is defined as, this is a self-join here, and this is the parent-child hierarchy which is getting created. So both of them are exposed as hierarchies in PowerView. And let's see how these are getting exposed and how you can utilize them. So here I can show you. So these are, so for example, here you have date, you have calendar year, semester, quarter, month, and date. So here, as you move over this, it automatically, so for example, if I come in, I select the quarter, it automatically selects all the levels above that. Okay? So the reason why we did this is primarily if you're requesting for detailed level data with respect to year, semester, quarter, month, and date, it's going to bring in a huge volume of data. And by getting the huge volume of data, it's going to be slower because it has to physically get so much amount of data. So one of the things which we did not want users to directly run into this is selecting the hierarchy and directly getting all the values. So this is intentionally they are using it. They're selecting it. So here I'm going to select calendar year and calendar semester. And let me get reseller sales amount. And I'm going to convert this to a matrix. So now you get appropriate subtotals for the hierarchy here. You get the various subtotals for the hierarchy. One more thing which you can do after doing to the matrix, you can also add, let's assume that you have the product. You can add product category and product subcategory. Okay? So this creates a complete matrix of various things. Both on rows and columns, you have various subtotals coming up. And now what you can do is, in PowerView, you have this show level. you can allow drill down on rows or on columns, okay, in Power View. So let's see what happens when you drill down. Enable this. So once you enable this, you see this for various calendar, for the rows, and then now on columns. So you get the top subtotals automatically here. You can drill in. So for example, you see that this is $32 million. Now I want to see how this is getting mapped on for each of the half years. And you can also drill in on each of the axes. Okay? And if you want to move back, you can move back here. All right? So drilling up and drilling down using Power View and on hierarchies. Okay? Now the second one, I'm going to minimize, change this. What we saw was employees here. So here you see the employees hierarchy. It shows various levels of the employees hierarchy from 02 to 06. These are the levels in the employee hierarchy. And so for example, I'm going to select the 3 levels here. And it selects the various users of that. And I'm going to select, let's assume that you select sales amount quota, right? So now automatically it provides you, these are the employees, these are the quotas, whatever which have values for that. Okay? So hierarchies from Power View perspective are just shown as hierarchies, both parent-child as well as user-level hierarchies. And you should be able to drill up or drill down or drill up by using the drill feature in Power View. Okay? The next demo is non-aggregatable attributes. Okay? How many of you are familiar with this? Non-aggregatable attributes? Okay, 1 person, 2 people. Okay, I'll show quickly exactly what this means. So we have an account dimension here. And this account dimension has a property here, is aggregatable equal to false. Okay? So you have various types of accounts, like statistical account, various accounts. It does not make sense from a business perspective to roll up all these numbers and add up the all level of the dimension attribute and whether you have a meaningful value. So if you do not have a meaningful value, then customers disable this and say is aggregatable equal to false. Now let's see how this is getting exposed in Power View. I'm going to expand. This is the account dimension, and I'm going to include for 2 levels here. And going to include the amount. So notice that you do not have the total for the table. So this essentially means you do not have the total because is aggregatable equal to false. But one additional thing you want to see is when you switch to matrix, you do see the subtotals just at this account level 2, because is aggregatable equal to false is only for the top level. It does not make sense to aggregate balance sheet, net income, and statistical account. So the modeler has specified is aggregatable equal to false, but it's perfectly fine to aggregate these within the particular account. Okay? So that's what you see as individual values. One interesting thing which you'll notice here is this total value is showing up as NA. Okay? Now, primarily, all MDX measures are variance. Does anyone know what variant means? Okay, I'll give a quick summary of what variant means. So MDX measures, what a variant means, it could take any data type. Okay, so what you saw was all these are currency values here, but this one is NA. So all MDX measures are variance. Power View understands now that multidimensional models support variance. This is not supported in tabular models before. So Power View understands these are variance, and it's able to analyze and understand and represent the right value. Okay? So these values are essentially coming back as currency. This is a NA value. And if you have cell errors, for example, for some expressions, you might have cell errors because you've defined certain kind of error information. Those cell errors are also returned back as strings, and you will see them in Power View. Okay? Let's go to the next one, default member. So how many of you are aware default member? Okay, I see at least several people are aware of it. So default member is a concept in multidimensional model where you can specify when a user is connecting to a particular cube, this is the default member for a particular dimension attribute. Okay, so let's see how this is being shown. So here I'm going to go into the scenario dimension here. The scenario dimension has so here you see default member. Okay, so this has been specified by the modeler as a default member. Okay, now the key question became, how do we honor this default member? Okay, so what we said was, let's walk through this scenario dimension here. What we said was, if the user directly requests, I want to be able to see all the members. This is basically, I want to group by on the Power View sheet. Then the user is intending to see all the values. Okay, so what we have done here is we are showing all the values in the particular dimension attribute. Even though there is a default member specified, the intention of the user by default is I want to see all the values. This is the gesture they are doing by adding this into the Power View sheet, so they see all the default members. Okay, now in order to see the default member, so one of the things we've done is, if you want to, you can drag and drop this field in the view, in the filter pane, and once you drag and drop, you see this value here. The default value is actual. So it understands this. What is the default value? It shows that in the filter pane for the user to see, oh, you have a default member specified, and the value is actual here, and it overrides that by default and shows this here. Now, once you have this in the filter pane, you specify this. Now we already added this. You specified the filter. You add it on the Power View sheet. It shows that value. Okay, and now if you remove this, you automatically get the value. Okay, so you are able to see what is the default member specified. It's shown in the filter pane, and it gets applied. You can apply this, but in addition to that, if the gesture is you want to see all the values, you can see all the values in Power View sheet. Okay, let's get to the next one. Okay, dynamic format string. How many of you have used dynamic format strings? Okay, very few people have used dynamic format string. Okay, so I'm going to show exactly what dynamic format string means here. Okay. So we have the scenario dimension, and let me walk through. This is the cube calculation script here. So you have the scenario dimension, and here, for this particular scenario dimension, the format string is currency here. This is a member in the scenario dimension called budget variance. But here you have budget variance percentage. This is format string is specified as percent here. Okay. Are people able to see this? Percent. This is the format string. Okay. So this is specified as a format string on this particular dimension attribute, and now let's see how this translates. I'm going to add this scenario dimension. So you can see that you have the dynamic format string here. So you have these things coming up as dollar symbols. This is a percentage, which has been a dynamic format string that has been applied. That percentage sign is automatically coming up here. Okay. So there's a lot of work which has gone behind the scene in terms of how to expose the metadata and how is this getting understood by Power View, and Power View is representing the right data which the user should see. Okay. So we've done a lot of work to make sure your existing investments completely, when you connect using Power View, you don't have to make any changes. It should just work. That's been the main theme for this. Okay. Now the second type of format string which is typically used is for currencies. Okay. So let me go over one more thing here. So this is a calculation here which specifies the destination currency has to be specified based on the locale. Okay? So this is a property called language, and that's usually represented based on the locale. You need to represent the values in the right currency value. And you can do currency conversions appropriately in the multidimensional model. I'm going to show you how this shows up. So I'm going to pick destination currency, and I'm going to just select internet sales amount here. So there are two factors which are coming up here. So one is you see the values coming up in the right currency, number one. And it does not make sense to aggregate these currency values. So is aggregatable is set to false for this dimension attribute, so you do not see the total here. Okay? So you get the right formatting, right currency. Depending on the currency, it's getting formatted at the end or at the beginning. So all of these are being handled by PowerView. Okay? We expose the metadata, appropriate metadata and data, and PowerView handles this and shows this accurately. So finish that. Let's get into, going to go into full screen mode. I'm using PowerView here directly as slides. I didn't want to switch back and forth, so I said, okay, let me do this. So calculated members. So how many of you have used calculated members? Okay. At least 50% I see the hands going up. So calculated members are, there are two types of, when you say calculated members, from the team's perspective, we look at it as members on a dimension attribute. People also think about calculated measures. So calculated measures are treated as measures. They will automatically work. So in some cases, calculated measures the user may not have specified an associated measure group. Then these get shown in a special measure group called measures, okay, in the PowerView field list, and they just work normally as existing measures. Calculated members, there are two major types of calculated members which we are aware of customers are using. One is primarily more of a time dimension scenario. I have a current date. I want to be able to do time calculations appropriately. So that is the most common scenario which we have heard from customers. 80–90% of them are using it. The second set of customers use calculated members on user hierarchies. Okay? So the first one is there is a children of all with a single real member. Okay? So I have a single real member called current date, and I create additional calculations, year to date, month to date, those type of calculation. And then the second one is calculated members on user hierarchies. Okay? So these are the two common types of calculated members. And we support the first one as part of the integration. We don't support the second one in terms of user hierarchy, calculated members on user hierarchies. What does it mean is we don't support? So essentially, you'll still be able to connect to your cube. You should still be able to see using PowerView. The only thing is those user hierarchies will still be shown. You will not see the members, calculated members. So there are a few more additional constraints or information. So this is useful information for you to know about what goes underneath the scenes. So these are additional constraints. You can have a single real member when the dimension has more than one attribute. So let's assume you have a dimension. It has n number of attributes. Let's assume 5 attributes. Then you can have calculated members on each of the attributes, but you can only have one real member. Optionally, you can have unknown member that we don't treat it as a real member. So it has to have only one real member. Okay? Alternately, if you have a dimension which has a single attribute, then that single attribute can have multiple real members, and you can still have calculated members on them. Okay? These are the two scenarios that are supported. And attribute cannot be the key of the attribute unless it's a single, it's the only attribute, and then not a parent-child attribute. You cannot have calculated members on parent-child attribute. You can still connect to the cube. You can still use PowerView against your cubes. The calculated members, which are there in user hierarchies, will not show up. Okay? Yes?
Quick question about formatting. In multidimensional, many times you also specify things like font, color, etc., etc.
Those are currently not available.
Currently?
Yes. Longer term, it's a matter of time. So we want to get this released. So so essentially, PowerView had to make a lot of changes for that to expose that. So that's one of the reasons it's not available as part of this release. So it's in our backlog. We need to improve on that. So yes,
but nothing else.
dynamic format string in terms of the format string also percentage and data. This is the most important one based on the customers, and locale also, so that you see the right data. So those two are available. Okay. So you have additional things which we felt were important but still minor. You can still leverage a lot of the functionality which are available. It's like background color, foreground color, font size, font type. These are various things which you can specify. Okay, so let's switch back and see how calculated members show up. I'm going to show you two types of calculated members here. So the first one is, you already saw this. This is the scenario dimension and amount. So this is the scenario dimension is a single attribute, and it has multiple real members and a couple of calculated members, budget variance and budget variant percentage. But actual and budget are real members. Okay? So this is the first scenario. Let's switch back to so this is the scenario dimension. If you go into the browser, you see scenario, budget, and forecast. These are the real members. And then you have the calculated members, budget variance, and budget variant percentage. Okay? So this is a scenario where you have single attribute and a single dimension, and you have multiple real members. Okay? The second scenario is the time dimension scenario. Here I have the date dimension here, and you have this attribute called fiscal date calculations. Okay? So what I've done here is this is a standard AdventureWorks sample. I've run a time intelligence wizard to create some of the year-to-date, month-to-date, quarter-to-date calculations. And as part of it, it created a single attribute called fiscal date calculations. And I'm going to go into the DSV to show you. So this is the data source view. And I'm going into the table here, and it is towards the end. It's created a column called fiscal date calculation. It's a single value called current date. Okay, this is the most common scenario which all of the customers and MVPs wanted. This is what is very, very important, and this calculated members in this scenario has to be solved. So how did we go about solving this and exposing this? So in PowerView, there are some challenges, design challenges in exposing this. So what we have done is, this is the date dimension which you saw, and you have all the attributes. The attribute which has the calculated member, what we have done here is, you can see on the right-hand side, so all the attributes as part of the dimension are exposed in the same dimension table name. The one which has the attribute which has a one real member and multiple calculations, we expose it in a separate table in PowerView. It's called fiscal date calculations. We prefix it with the regular dimension name so that it's easier for people to find it. And we also honor the display folder and show this here. Okay.
Do I have to do anything on the server side for PowerView to detect it?
No, you don't have to do anything at all.
PowerView picks it up and that's it?
Yes. We expose this appropriately in PowerView. You don't have to do any model changes. You have your existing multidimensional model. You upgrade to the version which has this. We will see at the end which version has it. You just upgrade your multidimensional server, connect with PowerView which has the functionality. You should just see it. Okay. A lot of the things we have exposed, the barrier to entry in terms of connecting, it should just work. That's the overall motto which we had. So this should just get exposed. Okay. We'll see how this is shown. So I'm going to select this fiscal date calculation. Let me not do this in this table. I'm going to create a new table here. Fiscal date calculation, and I'm going to create alternate sales amount. I'm going to convert this to a matrix first. Okay. So here, when you see this, the fiscal date calculations are all built in as part of the cube script. I'll show you in a minute. So the current date is the only one which is applicable. That is what you see. All the remaining values of NA, this is all defined in the cube, and you're seeing those values here. Okay. Now what I can do is I can go and add fiscal year. As soon as I add fiscal year, I see year over year growth, year over year growth percentage, and year to date. Right? So you see automatically these values getting shown here. And if I add the semester, and you will see the semester as well. So let me remove this, adding this here. So as soon as I add the semester, you see semester over semester growth as well. Okay. So as and when you want, you can add appropriate year, semester, wherever the calculations get applied, you can include it in part of your report. You can enable drill as well if needed, and you get the right value showing up. Okay. And in the cube, just want to quickly show where this is created. In the cube script, these are getting created. These are the calculations that get created here. Year-to-date calculation. These are the sequence of calculations that have been created by the time intelligence wizard for each of how these calculations should be applied. These are completely hidden from the end user as it should be, and the end user just sees the results. Okay. Okay. Let's switch back here. Okay. The next one is image URL. So one of the cool things with respect to Power View is the ability to import images and show the images to create appropriate interactive visualizations. As part of it, one of the key requests was, can you add image URL as a property type? So that's what we have done. So I'm going to switch back here and show you in the SQL Server Data Tools. I'm going to go into Geography Dimension. I have something called a country flag. So I have the country flag dimension attribute that has been created, and I'm marking this as image URL. This was not there before. As part of closing the gap of Power View connectivity to multidimensional model, we've added this as well, image URL. Okay. Now let's see how this gets exposed. So I'm just going to go and going to get state province and reseller sales amount. And one thing I can do here is so this is essentially what I've done here is I've created a simple table and added the country names here. Instead of country names, it will be much more better if you have the country flags for the tile by. This is a tile by feature, so I'm just going to drag and drop the country flag, and automatically you get the images. So these images currently are locally on this machine. It's an image URL. You can point to any of the URLs where you have the image. We provide this information back to Power View. Power View reaches out and gets the images and displays them. Okay? So this may be a cool way to create interactive visualization with images as well. Yes?
One of the tricks before to show images from reporting services, traditional RDL, was to turn the image field into a value, and then you would see it via reporting services. Where you have pictures of the product, for instance, and you don't have the URL. It's a blob.
Yes. Yes. So the question is, one of the tricks which people used to do initially was if there was a blob image and this was specified as a value column in analysis services multidimensional model. Now, is that getting exposed as a value column? We looked at it. The cost of implementing it and the performance is going to be really slow. And we didn't want, and to the best of our knowledge, a lot of the customers are not using this to the very broad adoption perspective. So it was very, very narrow scenario where one or two customers are using it. So we said we're not going to expose image blobs, which are exposed as value columns. Okay. Are people familiar with value columns? Okay. I'll just show you quickly for people who are not familiar. So you have something here. You have value column for a dimension attribute. That's what the question was about. If blobs are exposed as a value column here, is that getting exposed? Okay. Okay. The next one is perspectives and translations. Okay. How many of you use perspectives or translations? Okay. Probably 50% of them. Okay. So I'll quickly show what perspectives and translations are. So in the AdventureWorks, so you have perspectives. So these are various perspectives that have been created. So you have a very large model, and which has multiple dimensions and measure groups. Perspectives is a way for you to create multiple perspectives just for the users who are specifically interested in a specific part of the overall cube. Selecting that specific perspective reduces the overall list of objects they see in terms of pivot tables. And this is, by default, you have various set of perspectives that are created, targeting various measure groups. And then translations is another area where you can specify both metadata and data translation. These are essentially metadata information showing up for each of the various objects. In addition to that, I'm going to show product dimension here. So you have translations for the actual data translations also for when someone is connecting with locale identifier, this specific locale identifier, now select and use this particular column for showing the values. Okay. Now, how do we go about doing this? And how do you leverage this in Power View? So I'm going to go back here. And so I've created a RSDS file here. I'll show you how this looks like. So here in the RSDS file, in the connection string, I initially mentioned you can use cube equal to cube name or the perspective name. Here I'm using the perspective name called direct sales. And I'm using the locale identifier 1034, which is for Spanish Spain. So to show this, now once you connect here, let's see how this shows up. I'm going to launch Power View here. So now we can, in the field list, you see all the metadata showing up in the Spanish. Okay. Now, in addition to that, I'm not very familiar with Spanish, but I'm going to try. This is, I believe, Internet Order Count, I believe. So help me out in case if I make mistakes here. And product, that's customer count, okay. Customer count, and then this is, so I'm going to drag and drop category here and also subcategory. So you can see both the metadata and the data translations automatically getting applied. You can interact in Power View. You would need to create multiple RSDS files and expose this to the users. Depending on what they want, you can they can get both the data translation and metadata translation. Yes? Sorry, let me come closer. Yes?
You have to create one connection for each report, or you have to create several reports to achieve different kind of translation.
Okay. So the question is, can you create one report to achieve this, or do you need to create multiple reports? So essentially, this will be multiple connection strings. Essentially, as part of the Power View, you can create one report dynamically if you can change the RSDS file. You can, then some mechanism by which you can change it, then you should be able to create it. But essentially, if you're looking at it as like, if you're creating one report, it needs to point to a particular connection string which exposes this. Right? So the report will be detached because you see the report, you can save the report separately, but appropriately in the report you need to attach the RSDS file, the integration with those two, right? So if you want the users to automatically launch the RSDS file, then you would need to create separate RSDS file based on the translation. Then they can use these translations, connection strings, RSDS file. They will launch Power View, and then appropriately they'll see the right data and metadata. Okay. Okay. And then the last one I wanted to show you. Let's do full screen. We finished perspective and translation. And the next one is pin filters. So this is an enhancement which was added as part of the integration with Power View connectivity to multidimensional model. So this essentially is, you'll better understand it in the actual demo. So you have multiple views in Power View. If you want a particular filter which you are specifying to apply across all the views, this is what we call it as pin filters. Okay, there are two things which can be done. One is in the Power View sheet, you can apply it and see this flow through. Also, parametrically, you can pass this to the report using the URL, and you can specify what the value is, and you can apply this pin filters. So one of the key reasons we added was Dynamics AX. Anyone using Dynamics AX? Yeah, Dynamics AX 6.2, which was released. They, out of the box, ship about 15 cubes, multidimensional cubes. As part of that, they wanted to provide Power View integration with multidimensional model. And they wanted to be able to, in the context of a user looking at some of the analysis of Dynamics role center, they want to expose this. Okay, I want to be able to launch it, and specifically in the context of that user, they want to see this. So they want to apply these filters automatically in the Power View report they've pre-created. So as part of this, they are leveraging this as part of Dynamics AX 6.2, and then when you have this particular release, you will get this feature. So let's quickly look at how this is getting exposed. I'm going to go back. I've created a pre-created report called pin filters. I'm going to edit the report. So here I have two views. So one is the reseller with various values for each of the years. And I have another one, channel revenue by countries. Okay? And what I'm going to do is so there are various icons here in the filter. So the second icon, which shows as a pin, is the pin filter. Okay? By default, let's assume that I'm applying a filter here, and I'm going to add the same geography to this. Let me just add this to this view as well. Okay? When I apply this just to United States right now, I see all the values just for United States right now. And when I go into the second sheet, this shows up all the values for all the states. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say pin this filter. So when I pin this filter, so obviously this is still in United States. When I switch back to this view, this automatically, that filter is getting pinned across all the sheets, all the views in Power View. And you can see that this is getting applied only for United States. Now here, let's assume that I change this from United States to Australia. Okay? And this is still pinned I think I removed the pin, I think. Once I go here, it gets applied. So irrespective of where you are, you change the filter. Once it's pinned, it will get applied to all the filters. Yes, go ahead. So, could you repeat the question? The question is Power View a supported type and performance point? I don't know the answer. So send me an email. I can follow up and reply back. Okay. Okay. So in addition to this, so here I have this is the URL here. Copy paste it. So this is the syntax where the syntax here is I'm saying this is the report geography.country is equal to Australia. Okay, so I'm passing this as a parameter here. So this same report, it gets applied, and it applied to Australia for both the sheets. So it's just applying the same pin filters as part of the overall report. Okay. Let's switch back. Yes. Yes. Once you open up the report, then you can interact with the report, change it to a different one. No, it's not a secure way. It's essentially you are having a particular context, you want to apply the filter, right? Okay, let me quickly, we went through a lot of these demos, and I've included all the slides which you saw on Power View or are part of the deck as well. And let's go into summary here. So we saw how multidimensional models are getting exposed in Power View. Each of the features, complex features in terms of multidimensional model, how these are getting exposed in Power View. And there are various types of reports which we saw, interacting with various Power View features. How can these be utilized against your existing multidimensional models? And this is available in SQL Server 2012 SP1CU4. So this was released less than a month ago. So if you upgrade, you have your reporting services in SharePoint mode. You need to upgrade your reporting services in SharePoint mode. And then you need to upgrade your multidimensional models, the server which has multidimensional model. Then you will be able to integrate both of them. You will be able to use Power View to connect to the multidimensional models. Okay? Yes?
Is it one day possible to use it not in SharePoint? Because now it's always in SharePoint.
Yes. Hold that thought. The next slide. Hold the thought. The question is, it's only available in SharePoint. Right now, it's only available in SharePoint mode. Is it possible to use Power View not in SharePoint mode? Essentially, Power View in Excel, that's hopefully the question. Power View in Excel is available. Can you connect from Power View in Excel? So go back to the next slide. Okay. So these are common Q&As which several customers have asked in the presentations. The first one is, do I need to upgrade both SSAS and SSRS? That I answered this question earlier, yes. What multidimensional features are not supported? These are the three things which are not there: name sets and actions. These are not there, but you will still be able to connect to the cubes. You will still be able to interact with Power View. These objects will just not show up. That's all. Okay. The third one, self-security permissions applied to the connected user. So if you have self-security specified, the user who's connecting, who gets self-security applied, they cannot connect to Power View. Okay? So the same cube, another user does not have self-security. They can connect to the same cube. The only user who has self-security and certain cells have to be restricted, they cannot connect to Power View. Okay? So the amount of people who are using self-security from our polling various customers is small. This is something which is a little bit complex in terms of the design and exposing this. So that's why we've not included as part of this one. Okay? And what editions are these available? It's Enterprise and Business Intelligence editions. And then the last question, and can Power View and Excel connect to multidimensional models? It's one of the top priorities for the team. We're working on it. We don't have a timeline yet on when it will be released. Does it answer your question? Okay.
Just thinking about something more like a portal that's not really SharePoint, because you need SharePoint Enterprise, is correct?
Yes, SharePoint Enterprise. Okay. So I think the question is, can Power View be standalone without SharePoint in a portal environment? This is something which Power View team, the feedback has been received by the Power View team. They're looking into it in terms of anything communication-wise, whether it's going to be available. I don't have the information at this point in time. Okay.
So, question: member properties.
Yes.
Are those exposed? No.
So the question is, are member properties getting exposed? There are certain member properties that do get exposed in certain scenarios, depending on how it's being used. Not all member properties are not getting exposed by default. Okay.
So, for instance, if I'm talking about the product dimension,
Yes.
okay, and I'm at the dimension key,
Yes.
I'm at the dimension key, and I have the default attribute relationships, then every single attribute of the dimension automatically turns into a member property.
Yes.
In that case, would all those be shown or not?
So just to repeat the question, so you have a product dimension with the product dimension attribute and the set of member properties. Will all those be exposed? All those are getting exposed as columns. Some of them are exposed as hidden columns to Power View. You will not be able to see this in Power View because it just pollutes the overall field list. That's one of the reasons why we have not exposed this fully. You can still query it using DAX. These are hidden columns. There are certain scenarios where we do not. We do expose this. I can follow up offline, and I'm going to write a blog post separately on each of the various complex areas like calc members, member properties, various things. As part of it, I'll include it, exactly what areas you will be able to see it. But all of the columns do come back in the Discover CSDL metadata because each member property is exposed as a column. It's primarily, can you query it and analyze it? In Power View, it's not getting exposed, but you can still query it.
When you have upgraded to cumulative update 4,
Mm-hmm.
Multidimensional, the queries submitted by Power View or any DAX client,
Mm-hmm.
on the engine, on the server side, can I see the DAX execution plan?
Good question. I forgot to show this. So the question was, can I see the DAX execution plan when clients expose this? When clients connect and issue DAX queries. So this, I started running the trace. I forgot to include this. So you do see the full DAX query plan. Oh, sorry. So one of the things I missed showing was the DAX queries. What are the DAX queries? The DAX query plan, how it is getting exposed. It's fully available in Profiler. You should be able to see this, analyze this, and see where the time is being spent. Okay? I missed it. Thanks for the question. Service Pack 1 CU4, cumulative update 4.
The tools, the client tools, of course, if I'm upgrading the server, every single developer workstation should be upgraded as well, right? Or not?
Client tools meaning
Visual Studio. Do I
4.
have to apply cumulative update 4 to the developer workstations as well?
For what?
To use these and to expose, for instance, image URL.
Yeah, for exposing image URL, you do need to download the client tools. So if you're using Visual Studio 2012, there is a CU, along with CU4, we've exposed the downloadable package of Visual Studio BI Intelligence projects. You would need to get that. But other than that, other than image URL, there are no other enhancements we have made in the client tool. So because essentially you have your existing multidimensional model, they should just work. So that's been the overall motto.
Okay.
Yes.
Why is Power View being marketed as part of reporting services when it's published through Excel services?
So the question is, why is Power View marked as?
Why is it? It's part of reporting services, isn't it?
It is being developed as part of reporting services team.
But if you publish it through SharePoint, you do that via Excel services.
No. So when you publish it, you're publishing, so in the scenario of Excel and Power View reports, you're taking an Excel workbook and publishing it. It is still a Power View sheet, and when the Power View sheet opens up, it is reporting services that's sending the queries. So Excel services sends the appropriate queries for pivot tables, but Power View will be exposed, and Power View contacts the reporting services on the back end, and that reporting services sends the DAX queries back to the back end. So
if you take a look to the extension of a Power View report, and then I'm going to go on support.
Sure.
If you download it, and you open it on Notepad, it's the RTLX file. You would see internally a lot of content very similar to traditional RTL or RTLC.
So I had a copy of my 2012 book. I had another copy. So I wanted to. So Alejandro was asking a lot of questions. So for the person who was asking a lot of questions, so I want to give it out as well. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.